if I had a gun here that I wanted to show Brett, if I know anything about guns, I'm going to make damn sure that it's unloaded, right? I'm going to pull back the slide, I'm going to drop the magazine, pull back the slide, check the chamber, and do this in a redundant fashion that really looks like I'm suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder. I mean, it is truly redundant. And then I'll hand it to Brett, and if Brett knows anything about guns, he will do the same thing, having just seen me do it. And if he hands it back to me, again, I will do the same thing, even though there may be no ammunition around, right? So it really is crazy at the level of our explicit knowledge of the situation, and yet absolutely necessary to do. And it's not merely, it runs very deep. I mean, that whole time you're careful not to point the barrel of the gun at anything you would be afraid to shoot. And when people fail to live this way around guns, they, with some unnerving frequency, actually shoot themselves or people close to them by accident. So it is really the only proper hedge against just the odds of being in proximity to loaded weapons. And yet, if someone in the middle of this operation came up to us and said, actually there's a casino that just opened across the street that will take your bets about whether or not guns are loaded. Would you like to bet $1 million as to whether or not this gun is loaded? Well, of course, I would bet those $1 million every time that it's not loaded because I know it's not loaded. So there's a literal truth and a metaphorical truth, otherwise known as a very useful fiction, which in this case is actually more useful than the truth, right? But the only way I can understand its utility is, and even utter the phrase metaphorical truth in a way that's comprehensible, is in the context of distinguishing it from literal truth. Yeah, go ahead.
This is fascinating, Sam. Actually, this is I think next phase.
I'm worried by how excited you are. By
So I have a little story that might be helpful about that, and so you can tell me what you think about. You can think about this. Okay, so one of the things that I've been reconsidering since we talked last night is the nature of our dispute about the relationship between facts and values, because I think I can make a case that what I've been trying to do, especially in my first book, was to ground values in facts. But I'm not doing it the same way that you are exactly. So I don't want to make that a point of contention. And I'll get to that in a moment. But with regards to this metaphorical truth, let me tell you something. You tell me what you think about this. So one of the things that's been observed by anthropologists worldwide is that human beings tend to make sacrifices. So I'm going to spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes, laying out a sacrificial story. And the reason I want to do it is because, see, what I think happened with regards to the origin of these profound stories is that people first started to behave in certain ways that had survival significance. And that was selected for as a consequence of the standard selection practices. And so that was instantiated in behavior. And then because we could observe ourselves, because we're self-conscious creatures, that we started to make representations of those patterns and dramatize them and then encapsulate them in stories. So it's a bottom-up so it would be sort of like chimpanzees or wolves become aware of their dominance hierarchy structures and the strategies that they use. So a wolf, for example, if two wolves are having a dominance dispute, the wolf that gives up first lays down and puts his neck open so the other wolf can tear it out, and then the other wolf doesn't. And you could say, well, it's as if a wolf is following a rule about not killing a weaker member of the pack. Of course, wolves don't have rules. They have behavioral patterns. But a self-conscious wolf would watch what the wolves were doing and then say, well, it's as if we're acting out the idea that each wolf in the pack has intrinsic value. And then that starts to be, and maybe the wolves would have a little story about the heroic, forbearing wolf that doesn't tear out the neck of its opponents, and that's a good wolf. Well, that's good wolf ethics, and so, but it's grounded in the actual behavior. Okay, so we'll put that aside for a second. Now, here's the sacrificial story. So human beings have made sacrifices. It seems to be a standard practice all around the world. And in the biblical narratives, they would often sacrifice something of value, like a valuable animal.
Well, like a child. Let's start.
Well, no. Look. I'm not making light of this. I know that human sacrifice was a part of this.
Yeah,
And so
but that's, again, so just to give you a crib on where my mind goes here is
Yep.
human sacrifice is as old a religious precept as we know about.
Yes.
It's a cultural universal. The other sacrifices are derivations from it. Circumcision
Yes.
is a surrogate for the far more barbaric act of human sacrifice. And, it answers every test you would put to it with respect to its archetypal significance, its compelling presence in stories across all cultures. But the horror is that it actually has taken place in all these cultures based on
Yes.
explicit beliefs in the presence of just
Right. Well, Arthur
oppressive
Koestler,
scientific ignorance. right?
Arthur
So
Koestler used that as the argument for the essential insanity of humanity. Right?
no, but it's not just the insanity of humanity. It's the misapprehension of the causal structure of the cosmos. You don't know what controls the weather.
Well,
you don't know why people get sick. You think your neighbor is capable of casting magic spells on you. You're ignorant of everything, and you're trying to force some order on things. And
Yeah.
so when you don't, in the absence of engineers, and you don't know why certain buildings fall down, you actually can agree with your neighbor that maybe you should bury your firstborn child into every post hole of this new building, which in fact took place. And it's the consequence of ignorance. And so the problem is, if you're only going to talk about this
it's a
purified
very
notion of
strange- but
sacrifice.
It's a very strange consequence of ignorance, Sam.
Well, it's the notion that we're in relationship to invisible others that can mistreat us based on our not having offered enough.
We are.
But not precisely those others.
Well, but we're in relationship to the invisible others who will judge us in the future.
Okay,
So-
but
so
again,
let-
you're changing the noun in important ways.
I know, but I'm also trying to understand, and I'm not trying to argue against the horror of child sacrifice.
No, I would never imagine you would.
I know. But I'm also trying
But my work would be much easier if you did that.
Yes, and the work of journalists as well, although
yeah.
they've tried that pretty much anyways.
That's right.
So, right, that would even be worse than enforced monogamy, hypothetically.
No doubt.
Yes. So see, let's say that I'm trying to give the devil his due, and I'm trying to understand from an evolutionary perspective, like a cognitive behavioral evolutionary perspective, let's say, why that particular set of ideas would emerge, and in many places, perhaps autonomously, or once having emerged, would spread like wildfire. It's like, because I'm not willing to only attribute it to ignorance. Now, we could attribute it to ignorance, no problem, man. But there's more going on there because it is a human universal. And like there's all sorts of things that happen in nature as a consequence of biological and evolutionary processes that don't work out well for our current state of moral intuition, let's
Agreed,
say.
yes.
Okay, so one of the things, because I've been thinking about this sacrificial motif for a very long time, and trying to figure out, well, what the hell's the idea here exactly? And so here's one way of thinking about it. If you give up something of value now, you can gain something of more value in the future. Okay, so let's think about that idea for a minute. So the first thing is, that's a hell of an idea.
Yeah,
That's delay of
delayed
gratification.
gratification.
That's right. That's the discovery of the future as well. And so you might say, well, the notion of sacrifice is exactly the same thing as the discovery of the future. If we give up something we really value now, we can make a pact with the structure of existence itself such that better things will happen to us in the future. Now,
Yes.
okay, now what's weird about this, and it's hard to understand, is that it works. So when I talk to my students, for example, and I say, what did your parents sacrifice to send you to university? Many of them are children of first-generation immigrants. And so, like, man, they're on that story in a second, right? They know all sorts of things that their parents sacrificed. And they're delaying gratification in the present for a radically delayed return in the future. Now, you think, animals, generally speaking, they might act out the idea of delayed gratification as a consequence of running out their instincts, but they don't conceptualize it. It's not obvious that animals give up something they value right now in order to thrive in the future. There's an old story about how to catch a monkey, right? So
Yeah.
you put a jar up with rocks in it, and you put little candies, and it's a narrow-necked jar. You put little candies on top of the rocks. You put a few candies in front of the jar. Then the monkey comes along and picks up the candies, puts his hand in the jar, grabs the candies, and can't get it out.
Yeah. I still don't know if this actually works on monkeys or if it's just a great story.
Well, I don't know. I don't know either. And then I've heard various claims. But the point is, you can go pick up the monkey. He won't let go of the candies. Now, perhaps he would. But the issue is that it's not obvious that animals will forego an immediate gratification for a future gratification.
I
Now,
don't think that's right, actually. And I actually want to hold.
well,
each
the question is, will they do it consciously? They might act it out. They act it out. That's not the issue.
It's very hard to know if it's conscious because they won't
I know.
respond to the questionnaires. But
I know, and obviously the line between acting it out and starting to consciously represent it is a tenuous one. But what looks to me like what happened is that after we observed that people who were capable of delaying gratification sacrificed things that they valued in order to obtain a future goal, and it worked, that we started to codify that as a representation and then started to act it out. And so the story, and you'd say, well, that produced strange variants, but there's a reason for that too, as far as I can say. So imagine this, imagine that there's a rule of thumb. Sacrificing what you find valuable now will ensure certain benefits in the future. Well, then the question becomes, how good could those future benefits be? And so that might be heavenly, let's say, in the archetypal extreme. And what's the ultimate sacrifice that you have to perform? And then I would say, well, the child sacrifice fits into that category. And so it's as if those ideas were pushed to the radical extreme. And you could say, well, that's a pathological extreme. It's like, well, it is a pathological extreme. But I think we also have to understand that some of the things that we've learned as we've evolved towards our current state of wisdom, such as it is that they were learned in a very bloody and catastrophic way. They were learned with incredible difficulty. And delay of gratification was certainly one of those, because it's a hell of a thing to learn when you're in conditions of privation.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the issue here for me is that you don't need a conception of, you don't need any kind of positive gloss on human sacrifice as a meme or as an archetype in order to form a coherent picture of the future that can motivate you. So delayed gratification is fully separable from a notion that it might ever be rational or good to sacrifice a child as an offering to an invisible other that doesn't
But
exist.
how do you know it's separable? Because that's the developmental history. As you said, the
So
sacrifices
even if
came first.
I think it is in fact historically separable, but let's just say it's not. Let's just say it's a matter of our origins. They're united. They're of a piece. It is the genetic fallacy to care about that origin. I mean, to say that that is the only path forward toward a notion of the future, given where we've come from, or that it's somehow necessary to venerate now, or that it's good that we took that path.
But we do venerate the idea of sacrifice now. But I would say that
But
what's happened
I
is
would
that
say
it's
we do it to the detriment of our moral intuitions in the religious context. So, for instance, I think that the notion that Christianity is actually a cult of human sacrifice. Christianity is not a religion that repudiates human sacrifice. Christianity is a religion that says, actually, no, human sacrifice is necessary, and there was only one that, in fact, was necessary and effective, and that's the sacrifice of Jesus. And I think that is, when you dig into the details, not only a morally uninteresting vision of our circumstance and how we can be redeemed, it's morally abhorrent.